The world has entered a new era of tension. Many are calling it a new Cold War. It involves the same major players from history, but in a new formation. The United States, Russia, and a newly powerful China are locked in a contest for a global influence. This is not a conflict fought with massive armies facing each other across a fortified border. Instead, it's really a war of shadows, waged in boardrooms, on the internet, and in the quiet corridors of power. It's a competition that avoids direct military confrontation because, honestly, the costs would be too high for everyone involved. The memory of past global conflicts serves as a powerful reminder of where open warfare can lead. This new struggle is fundamentally different from the original Cold War. The old conflict was a clear battle between two opposing ideas, American-led capitalism and Soviet-led communism. The world was split into two distinct blocks, with very little economic or social connection between them. Today, though, the lines are much blurrier. The United States and China, the two main competitors, are deeply connected through trade and finance. Their economies depend on each other in ways that would have been unimaginable during the First Cold War. This economic interdependence creates a complex relationship of both rivalry and reliance, making the competition far more nuanced and unpredictable. The rivalry today is less about spreading a single ideology across the globe and more about securing national interests. For the United States, the goal is to maintain its position as the world's leading power. For China, the objective is to reclaim what it sees as its rightful place as a global leader and to build a world order that is more favorable to its interests. Russia, for its part, seeks to restore its influence on the world stage and push back against what it perceives as Western encroachment on its borders. These competing ambitions fuel a quiet but intense struggle for dominance in every corner of the planet. This contest unfolds on multiple fronts at once. It's a battle for economic supremacy, where trade tariffs and financial sanctions are the chosen weapons. It's a race for technological superiority, where control over artificial intelligence and 5G networks is the prize. It's also a war for hearts and minds, fought through sophisticated information campaigns and covert operations, designed to shape public opinion and destabilize adversaries from within. Understanding this new form of global competition is essential, as its outcome will define the world for generations to come, shaping the lives of people everywhere, whether they realize it or not. In this new era of competition, money is power. The most visible battles are not fought with soldiers, but with economic tools. The United States, for example, wields the immense power of the US dollar. Because the dollar is the world's primary reserve currency, most international trade is conducted in it. This gives Washington a unique and powerful weapon. By imposing sanctions, the United States can effectively cut off countries or companies from the global financial system. This has been used against Russia for its actions in Ukraine and against other nations to pressure them to change their policies. This weaponization of finance is a key element of modern power politics. China has responded by pursuing its own economic strategy to counter American dominance. The Belt and Road Initiative is a prime example. Through this massive infrastructure project, China is building ports, railways, and pipelines across Asia, Africa, and Europe. It's lending vast sums of money to developing countries to fund these projects. This not only creates new markets for Chinese goods, but also builds a network of nations that are economically and politically aligned with Beijing. China is creating an alternative economic sphere where its influence is paramount, slowly chipping away at the long-standing financial order led by the United States. The economic competition extends deep into the realm of trade. For years, the world embraced the idea of free trade, believing it would lead to peace and prosperity for all. But now, trade is seen as a tool of national security. The United States has imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, accusing Beijing of unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. These actions are designed to protect American industries and pressure China to change its economic model. This trade war has disrupted global supply chains and created uncertainty for businesses around the world, showing how economic disputes can have far-reaching consequences. This economic warfare creates a difficult situation for other countries. They're often caught in the middle, forced to choose between the world's two largest economies. Aligning too closely with the United States could risk economic punishment from China and vice versa. This pressure is felt from Europe to Southeast Asia, as nations try to navigate the treacherous waters of great power competition. The battle for economic influence is not just about gaining wealth, it's about building leverage, securing alliances, and shaping the global rules of the game in one's own favor. It's a long, drawn-out contest with no clear end in sight. The contest for global leadership is now inextricably linked to the race for technological supremacy. The technologies that will define the 21st century, such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and 5G networks, are the new battlegrounds. Whichever nation masters these fields will gain a decisive economic and military advantage. The United States and China are pouring billions of dollars into research and development, each determined to out-innovate the other. This competition is not just about creating faster smartphones or more convenient apps, it's about controlling the very infrastructure of modern life and the future of global power. One of the most intense fronts in this tech war is the development of 5G mobile networks. These networks promise to connect everything, from self-driving cars to advanced robotics, at incredibly high speeds. The Chinese company Huawei became a global leader in this technology, offering affordable and advanced equipment around the world. However, the United States viewed Huawei's rise as a major security threat. Washington argued that the company's close ties to the Chinese government meant its equipment could be used for espionage. The United States government then launched a global campaign to persuade its allies to ban Huawei from their 5G networks, turning a commercial competition into a geopolitical showdown. The rivalry also extends to the tiny microchips that power nearly all modern electronics. These semiconductors are the brains of the digital world, and their production is concentrated in just a few places like Taiwan. Recognizing this vulnerability, both the United States and China are now racing to build their own domestic chip-making capabilities. The United States has passed legislation to invest heavily in its semiconductor industry and has imposed strict export controls to slow down China's progress. This chip war is a clear sign that technology is no longer seen as a neutral field of commercial activity, but as a critical element of national security. This intense competition for technological dominance changes the nature of global power. In the past, a country's strength was measured by the size of its army or the reach of its navy. Today, it's also measured by its number of patents, the sophistication of its algorithms, and its ability to protect its digital networks from attack. The technology race is a high-stakes game where the winner could gain the ability to reshape global communications, commerce, and even conflict itself. It's a quiet but relentless struggle to build the future and to control it. Beyond the visible realms of economics and technology, the new Cold War is fought in the shadows. Covert operations and influence campaigns have become standard tools of statecraft for the major powers. These actions are designed to achieve strategic goals without resorting to open conflict. They aim to destabilize adversaries, shape political outcomes in other countries, and spread a particular narrative to a global audience. Russia, for example, has been widely accused of interfering in foreign elections, including the 2016 United States presidential election, through social media disinformation campaigns and hacking of political organizations. These efforts are meant to sow discord and weaken public trust in democratic institutions. China has also developed sophisticated methods of exerting influence abroad. It uses a combination of economic incentives and subtle pressure to shape how it is perceived around the world. For instance, it has been known to leverage its massive market to pressure Hollywood studios to portray China in a positive light, or to silence criticism of its human rights record. Beijing also funds Confucius Institutes at universities worldwide, which promote Chinese language and culture, but have been criticized as vehicles for propaganda and monitoring Chinese students abroad. These are not acts of war in the traditional sense, but they are deliberate efforts to expand its soft power and global standing. The United States, too, has a long history of covert action, and it continues to use these tools in the modern era. United States intelligence agencies conduct cyber operations to gather intelligence and disrupt the activities of adversaries. They also support media outlets and civil society groups in other countries to promote democratic values and counter anti-American narratives. These actions are often justified as necessary measures to defend national interests and uphold a rules-based international order. However, to rivals like Russia and China, these activities are seen as illegitimate interference in their internal affairs, further fueling mistrust and escalating the silent conflict. This hidden competition creates a climate of perpetual suspicion and uncertainty. it becomes difficult to know whether a protest, a news story, or a social media trend is a genuine grassroots movement or the result of a foreign influence operation. This blurring of lines is intentional. The goal is to create confusion and make it harder for citizens to trust their own governments and institutions. This war of narratives and secret maneuvers is a key feature of the new Cold War, a battle for control over what people believe is true. It's a subtle but powerful form of warfare in the 21st century. The critical decisions that define this new era of competition are often made far from public view. They happen in secure meeting rooms, during private phone calls, and honestly, they're usually based on the advice of a small circle of trusted aides. The personalities and impulses of leaders play an enormous role in shaping foreign policy. For instance, during the Trump administration, there were moments of high tension where the president's unpredictable nature created significant risks. One reported incident involved President Trump expressing a desire to shoot down an Iranian missile during a test, an action that would have been an act of war. It was not legal arguments, but an appeal to his public image by his chief of staff that reportedly prevented a potential escalation. Advisors are the gatekeepers of information and play a crucial role in steering a leader's decisions. They can frame issues in a certain way, emphasizing some risks, while downplaying others. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton described the environment in the White House as frightening because of the president's impulsiveness, highlighting the immense pressure on those around the leader to manage and guide policy. In another instance, advisors reportedly used polling data showing broad American support for international alliances, like NATO, to persuade President Trump not to withdraw from them. This shows how internal dynamics and the persuasive power of a few individuals can have major consequences for global stability. In Beijing and Moscow, decision-making is even more centralized and opaque. Power is concentrated in the hands of President Xi Jinping in China and President Vladimir Putin in Russia. These leaders are surrounded by loyalists, and public debate on foreign policy is highly restricted. This consolidation of power allows them to make bold, long-term strategic moves, such as Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine or China's assertive actions in the South China Sea. However, it also creates risks. With fewer dissenting voices, there is a greater chance of miscalculation, as leaders may only receive information that confirms their existing beliefs and biases. The secrecy surrounding these high-level decisions makes the new Cold War particularly dangerous. Without transparency, it is difficult for other nations and for the public to understand the intentions and motivations behind a certain action. This can lead to misunderstandings and misinterpretations, where one side sees a defensive move and the other sees an aggressive provocation. The closed-door nature of great power politics means that the world's fate often rests on the judgment, temperament, and interpersonal dynamics of a very small number of people, making the international environment feel constantly on edge. History offers important lessons for the leaders navigating today's great power competition. The original Cold War provides, honestly, a wealth of cautionary tales. One of the most significant is the story of the Soviet Union's collapse. The USSR spent enormous resources trying to match the United States in a global military and ideological struggle. It supported proxy wars, funded communist movements, and built a massive nuclear arsenal. This quest for global status led to strategic overreach. The Soviet economy, unable to sustain such immense spending, eventually crumbled. This serves as a stark warning to today's powers about the dangers of overextending their resources in the pursuit of global dominance. Another key lesson from the past revolves around the idea that economic interdependence can foster peace. After World War II, many believed that by linking the economies of former enemies, future wars could be prevented. This was the logic behind the creation of what is now the European Union. For decades, this theory of Pax Economica, or peace through economics, guided the process of globalization. The United States welcomed China into the global trading system, hoping that economic integration would lead to political liberalization. While that hope has not fully materialized, the deep economic ties that now exist between the United States and China make a total decoupling incredibly costly and difficult, acting as a brake on direct conflict. The past also teaches us about the critical importance of alliances. During the Cold War, the United States built a strong network of allies, like NATO, which provided collective security against the Soviet threat. These alliances were a major source of American strength. Today, maintaining these relationships is just as crucial. Russia's actions in Ukraine have revitalized NATO, reminding its members of the value of mutual defense. For the United States, strong alliances in both Europe and Asia are essential for balancing the power of China and Russia. However, these relationships require constant attention and can be strained by disagreements over trade and security burdens. Finally, history warns about the ever-present danger of miscalculation. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 brought the world to the brink of nuclear war, a result of misjudgments and escalating tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. Today, with multiple powers competing and new technologies like cyber warfare blurring the lines of conflict, the potential for a similar crisis is very real. A misread signal or an accidental clash in the South China Sea or Eastern Europe could quickly spiral out of control. The most important lesson from the past is that in a world of great powers, caution and clear communication are essential for survival. While we call it a new Cold War, the dangers we face today are distinct from those of the past. The single greatest fear during the original Cold War was a massive, all-out nuclear exchange between the United States and the Soviet Union. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, created a terrifying stability, where both sides knew a first strike would lead to their own annihilation. Today, while the risk of nuclear war has not vanished, the more immediate dangers often feel more diffuse and unpredictable. The risk is less about a planned, large-scale attack and more about an accidental or impulsive escalation. The volatility of individual leaders presents, honestly, a significant modern risk. In a world where decisions can be announced in a tweet, the guardrails that once slowed down the path to conflict can be easily bypassed. As seen in the incident with the Iranian missile test, a leader's personal whim could potentially trigger a war. This unpredictability is not limited to one country. Centralized power in Russia and China means that the stability of the international system can depend heavily on the health, judgment, and ambitions of just a few individuals. This makes the global environment more fragile and prone to sudden crises based on personal calculations rather than established national strategies. Another new danger comes from the interconnectedness of our world. While economic ties can be a source of stability, they also create new vulnerabilities. A cyber attack on a major financial institution could trigger a global economic crisis. The disruption of key supply chains for things like semiconductors or medical supplies can have immediate and severe consequences for people's daily lives. During the original Cold War, the two blocs were largely separate. Today, the battle is being fought within a single globalized system. This means that a conflict in one area can quickly spread and affect everyone, creating a cascade of failures across the system. The rise of non-state actors and proxy warfare also adds a new layer of complexity and risk. Great powers can support proxy groups, mercenaries, or hackers to fight their battles for them, allowing them to exert influence while maintaining deniability. This is visible in conflicts in places like Syria and across Africa. This makes it harder to assign responsibility and increases the chance of miscalculation. An attack by a proxy group could be mistaken for a direct act of aggression by a state, leading to a major retaliation. These new, ambiguous forms of conflict make the world a more complicated and dangerous place. This great power competition might seem like a distant game played by world leaders, but its effects are felt in our everyday lives. The economic battles have a direct impact on your wallet. Tariffs imposed in a trade war can make imported goods, from electronics to clothing, more expensive. When countries use sanctions, they can disrupt supply chains and cause prices for things like gasoline to rise. The competition also influences job opportunities. A government's decision to protect a certain industry, like steel or semiconductors, can create jobs in one area but lead to job losses in another. Your economic well-being is connected to this global struggle. The technology race also shapes the world you live in. The competition over fifth-generation networks, for example, affects how quickly you can get faster internet and what new services become available. The fight for control over data and digital platforms has huge implications for your privacy. When you use social media or search for information online, you are entering a space that is part of this geopolitical contest. The rules governing how your personal data is collected and used are being shaped by this rivalry between nations with very different ideas about individual freedom and state control. This competition also affects our sense of security and the information we consume. Influence campaigns are designed to spread doubt and division within societies. They can amplify conspiracy theories and make it harder to have a constructive public debate about important issues. When you see polarizing content on social media, it might be part of a deliberate effort by a foreign power to weaken your country from within. This erodes trust in media, in government, and in each other, making it more difficult to solve shared problems. The struggle for truth is a real battlefield, and every citizen is on the front line. Ultimately, this silent struggle will determine the kind of world our children inherit. Will it be a world dominated by a few powerful nations where smaller countries are forced to pick sides? Or will it be a world based on international rules and cooperation? The outcome of this new Cold War will influence everything from the fight against climate change to the prevention of future pandemics, issues that require global collaboration. The choices made by leaders today in Washington, Beijing, and Moscow will set the course for the rest of the century. That is why this competition matters deeply to every single one of us. As this new Cold War continues to unfold, there are several key trends to watch that will signal the future direction of the conflict. First, pay close attention to the technological race, especially in the field of artificial intelligence. AI is not just another technology. It has the potential to be a transformative force in both economic and military affairs. The country that achieves a breakthrough in AI could gain a massive advantage. Watch for how the United States and China regulate AI development, how they apply it to their militaries, and whether they can agree on any international rules to prevent its misuse. This domain will be a central arena of competition. Second, monitor the health of global alliances. The strength of the American-led alliance system, particularly NATO, and partnerships in Asia, is a critical variable. Will these alliances remain united in the face of Russian and Chinese pressure, or will they begin to fracture over internal disagreements? Watch for shifts in policy in key allied nations like Germany, Japan, and India. At the same time, keep an eye on the deepening partnership between China and Russia. The extent to which they formalize their alignment against the West will be a major indicator of how polarized the world is becoming. Third, observe the economic front, particularly the status of the United States dollar. For now, the dollar remains the dominant global currency, which gives the United States immense power. However, countries like China and Russia are actively trying to create alternatives and conduct more trade in their own currencies. Any significant shift away from the dollar would be a major sign of declining United States influence and would fundamentally reshape the global economic landscape. Watch for moves by major economies to diversify their currency reserves or create new payment systems that bypass the United States controlled network. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, watch the domestic politics within the great powers themselves. The internal stability and political direction of the United States, China, and Russia will have enormous consequences for the world. An election in the United States can dramatically alter its foreign policy. Economic problems in China could lead its leadership to become either more aggressive or more cooperative in the US. Political instability in Russia can create a dangerous direction. The future of this global competition will be shaped as much by events at home as it is by actions abroad. These are the signposts that will tell us where this new struggle is headed.